Yeah, and that sort of leads to one thing, right? Whilst on the volume perspective, you look at the market, you've seen a lot of retail consumers and investors be burnt, right? There's no doubt about it. It's been super painful for a lot of individuals that put a lot of money into these different 10,000 APY yields, but or 20% in Anchor Protocol, for example, or in Celsius and stuff like that. But then on the flip side, I also argue from a dollar amount perspective, a large portion of the suffering is with institutional investors, right? So the smart money, you have people like Three Arrows Capital that were going to hedge funds and big institutional investors and borrowing from them and using that as a collateral to hedge and earn and promise yields on the other side. So every time they promise yields to get these hundreds of millions of dollars from these big institutions that are Wall Street, right? These are the people that are educated in these financial instruments. They study them, they have analysts, they have teams, and they are professional accredited investors that are the ones that I feel really abused this, especially in this downturn, really sort of were the ones that really took us down an angle and all of a sudden extracted all of the liquidity out of the market.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking
Uh,
and incredibly
yeah.
disappointing. And I would love to hear a little bit more about what actually went down when more of this information emerges, because at the end of the day, taking a step back, we as retail investors think that the institutional investors have the strategies in place to mitigate against these
Yeah.
sorts of problems. But it seems like that's not the case. Was it greed? Was it something else? Was it just bad decisions? I would love to know.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, yeah, and we'll find out, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just have my hunch, which I think it is partially greed. I mean, Wall Street does have a reputation for being barbarians at the gate, or wolves of Wall Street, or the Shark Tank. So it does have a bit of they smell blood and they go for it. And then on the flip side, though, I think it's also, FOMO, right? A large portion is FOMO. Oh, they went in and they working with this company. They must be reputable because we both went to Goldman Sachs together, so we trust these guys. Or we used to work at JP Morgan or whatever it is, and we'll trust these guys and we'll give it to them and they'll work it out for
Yeah,
us, right?
it's funny that you say
Um,
that because the reputation of institutional investors is they don't succumb to emotions. It's very black and white. You have a strategy in place, you
yeah,
execute the strategy. FOMO shouldn't come into it. But I've had experience running startups and dealing with VCs, and I can tell you, VC funding is almost entirely based off FOMO. If you can drum up some sort of interest, people talking about you, that will effectively just attract VC investment. So I don't know if we can ever really escape our emotions.
yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why, sort of, I don't know, in crypto, I mean, even in my signature in my emails, I have DYOR, right? So no matter what I say or what I write, I just find it so important for us to do our own research, right? To learn about what is right, what is wrong, what are other people doing, go get your information and figure out what is right for you. Um, how do you feel about that? And sort of, how and where do you find, I believe that if you do your own research, in the world wide web, we have access to all this information and we can educate ourselves, right? And we can participate in these opportunities that pre crypto days or pre um, web 3, if we call it web 3, they weren't necessarily accessible to all of us. And so how do you balance that, and sort of, yeah,
Yeah,
and does that really have an economic impact to a community?
yeah. The question of do your own research is quite interesting. Something that I've been trying to wrestle with. And my gut instinct
Yeah,
actually is that, particularly last year, there were a lot of investors, these mom and pop investors, who were looking for that overnight return that just treated
yeah,
crypto as, hey, I'll just put, 1% of my net worth or 2% of my net worth into something that promises me a million percent APY. I don't really need to do your own
yeah,
research. And in 2021, there was so much money going around the economy. everyone was completely leveraged. Everyone had,
Flush with
yeah,
money. Yeah.
exactly. Cheap money was going around, low interest rates, and so
Yeah.
people were willing to take that risk. And I would love to know what percentage of crypto investments were made up from those mom and pop investors who had put aside a couple of percent of their net worth just to, effectively play lottery with crypto. So for these types of investors, research is not really part of the equation. They didn't really want to do that. They didn't have time for it. They were
Yeah.
busy doing other things full time. And where do you start? Which leads me to the next thing, the next point, which is how do you do your own research? And it can be quite daunting because most people are quite challenged by technology, which makes sense, right? It's complicated. They can be intimidated by it.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is people
Mathematical.
defer their investment decisions to quote unquote influencers who are paid to effectively
Yeah.
shill products and protocols. But the investors have no idea that that payment is taking place in the background. And we've seen many instances of these quote unquote influencers promoting a protocol and then dumping on their investors, effectively treating their audience as exit liquidity. So what I would love to see is more financial education coming out, actually taking through people,
Yeah. Yeah.
taking people through the exact process of what it looks like to be doing your own research. What do the tokenomics look like? What does a vesting schedule look like? What are the emissions rates? What is the purpose of the token? Is it there to be exchanged, or is it there to be held? And will it accrue value, or is it inflationary? These sorts of questions, I think people could use a very useful framework to really try and do their own research.